What's up, guys? Welcome to another Fantasy Fellowship discussion. My name's Damian. I'm joined by Amy, Nessa, Nora.
Hi.
Today, we're going to be discussing the Indie Spotlight Initiative books that we've been covering over on the Fantasy Fellowship for the past few months. So we're going to be doing the first four books, which are The Look of a King by Tom Dumbrell, Fangs of War by E.J. Doble, Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill, and The Soul's Aspect by Mark Holloway. So we're going to get started off with The Look of a King, written by Tom Dumbrell. It's a very sort of grounded fantasy, almost like a historical fiction more than your stereotypical fantasy. I've read the whole trilogy, so I'm not going to dive into it too much. But I was a big fan of all three of them. But we're only really going to cover the first book, Look of a King. I do think, admittedly, Look of a King is the weakest book out of all three of them. But the books do get a lot better as they progress. So, Amy, if you'd like to start us off with your opinion on Look of a King, your thoughts.
Yes. So I've read the first and the second, and I did find the first one wasn't as good as the second.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think it was just because there were some things in the first one which I wanted more information about it, and at times it just felt it was a bit rushed. And then it got to the end, and I was like, okay, this is getting really good. And then it was over.
Yeah, that was my problem as well. Like, I thought the pacing of the first book was very good, but it was Tom's debut book, and you've got to forgive him for some sort of teething errors and mistakes there. But overall, the pacing I thought was really good. But like you said, at times I thought some of it were quite rushed, and I would have liked more insight on certain characters, which if you've read the third book, you do get a bit more insight on certain characters from the first book. I won't say more than that, but yeah,
you also get it in the second as well. I think you get more insight into some of the other characters.
Yes, definitely. Some of the more like villainous characters from book one, you get a lot more insight of those in the book two, and in my opinion, book two is like a massive improvement in terms of character work, in terms of story, in terms of writing. It's just so much better. And I had the privilege of interviewing Tom a few months ago with Daniel for the Fantasy Fellowship YouTube, and lovely guy, Tom. Quite a good mate of mine now, actually. And apart from his dislike of Robin Hobb, which we won't get into because that's just absolutely blasphemous, what I found quite interesting was that his wife actually helped him with a lot of the story work and a lot of the character work and the overall just vibes of the whole story. So that was quite an interesting thought I heard from Tom. But what about you, Nora? What's your opinions on the game?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think I found it was definitely very, like, I think I'm used to longer books. And so the first kind of part was really fast. And there were certain like places where I was like, I kind of wanted a bit more. And all of a sudden things were happening really fast. And then I think when it kind of slowed down in the middle, I kind of enjoyed that a bit whenever you kind of get to, learn more about the characters. And the ending definitely with kind of when you get more of the plots and like the twists and turns. I really got into it, but I haven't read the second one yet. But it was definitely, I found the first bit, it was kind of very fast paced for me, just what I'm used to. And then, I think Cyrus, I felt like I was rooting for him, when as he's like struggling, kind of figuring out what to do. So I think I really enjoyed his character, but I'm looking forward to kind of the next book to kind of getting more of the characters. But the beginning, I think for me was just it was very fast, and there were certain places where I wanted more.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's almost like a blistering pace, wasn't it? It's a short book as well. It's only like 230, 240 sort of pages, and there is a lot crammed into it. It does move at a very wicked pace, and I would have loved, because there's so much depth to some of the characters in the world and history. I would have loved like 500, 600 pages of that, and I think that would have worked really, really, really well. Like you said though, Cyrus is definitely a very, very easy character to root for, and obviously Augustus. We're getting spoilers there, but sort of like his opposite. I got massive. I don't know if well, I'm sure most of you guys have seen Game of Thrones. I got massive Joffrey vibes from Augustus. He reminded me a lot of Joffrey.
I said that as well. I'm pretty sure I asked him that in the interview question.
Yeah, I think it was you. Yeah.
It reminded me of him a lot.
He was very much like Joffrey, and that was one of my favourite bits of the character arc. Cyrus was very easy to root for. Joffrey, bit of a twat. Garrett was easy to
Joffrey now, Damian.
Joffrey, oh god, yeah. Augustus, bit of a twat. Garrett was great. Yeah, but it's the second book really that the characters really shine. So definitely, Nora, I recommend getting to that second book. I believe it's No Place for Peace, the second book. Yeah, No Place for Peace. Definitely get that as soon as possible. But in my opinion, the third book, Where Heroes Were Born, follows a different sort of trajectory, different characters, kind of. But that is just superior to the other two books in every possible way. Well, sorry, I've rambled there. Nessa, how about you? Would you like to share your thoughts?
That was one of the books I didn't read because it was during the readathon chaos, and it somehow went under the radar until the interview came out, and then I got all the books, and they're waiting for me to read them. So coming soon.
Yeah, no, definitely do it. It's like we said before. It's a very quick book, and only got 240 pages, and I'm pretty sure I read it in like a day because it just the pacing of it is so quick. It's rapid, and it's a very easy book. It's an ideal book to read if you're slumping, I think, because it reads really quickly. But I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to Tom. It's very simple, and it's not flowery and it's not complicated. It's very easy to follow. There's a very sort of direct like contrast of characters. You have your evil, you have your good, you have your bad. It's not very black and white. It's only with the later books that the characters do start to get more grey in sort of their morality. But yeah, obviously, I'm a big fan of the books overall as a trilogy, and I've got I've got the broken binding omnibus edition here, which is absolutely stunning.
I managed to get that on eBay second hand because I missed this out. I got it. It's so nice.
It's one of the most beautiful books that I own. And just let's look at the inside the dust jacket there, just for everyone watching. It's absolutely stunning. And yeah, Tom is a very, 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 very lovely guy. And obviously, Look of the King aside, which I thought was a really good book, especially for a debut entry. The overall series, once you get the whole trilogy, you get everything in perspective. It's just very complete, and the character work and you see Tom's sort of skill as a writer improve with each book, and the story improves, the character improves, and I definitely can't recommend reading the first book and the overall trilogy enough. Most definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely a big jump from the first book to the second book, I think, in his writing skills and the development. You can definitely tell.
And without getting into spoilers too much, the first book is pretty much told from Cyrus's perspective, but you get a bit of Garrett as well, don't you? I'm not going to say whose perspective you start to touch on in the second book, but you get a lot more point of views, and you get point of views from characters that you originally thought were quite villainous in book one, and they still do have those villainous traits to them, but they're a lot more like morally grey. They're a lot more grounded, and you see their reasoning for doing why they've done some of the things that they've done, and you kind of root for them in a way as well.
It kind of puts that backstory, doesn't it, as to like, oh, okay, this makes sense why they've done that.
Yeah, it does.
And I can see why they would have done it, and you're a bit like, okay, kind of fair enough.
Fair enough now, yeah, fair enough. And so yeah, Nessa. I know like Book of the King got read during the whole redefined chaos. That's when it was sort of doing the rounds within Fantasy Fellowship. But whenever you get the chance, I do believe it's on Kindle Unlimited at the moment.
I bought all 3 of them when there's a sale right after the readathon, and I jumped on it. So they're there. They're just waiting.
Yeah, they're very quick books, very quick. And like I said, perfect if you're slumping, because they just read really quick. They're very simple. Well, book 3 gets a lot more sort of in depth, and book 2 is a massive step up from book 1 in that sense. But book 1 is perfect if you're slumping. I think it's just Tom's described to me like because it's not your typical fantasy. It doesn't have magic. It doesn't have fantasy, like fantastical sort of creatures. It reads a lot more like historical fiction, actually. I know, Nessa, you like your historical fiction, don't you? It's very Arthurian in style. There's a lot of resemblance to, you know, King Arthur, Excalibur, that sort of vibes and storyline to it. So I do think you would like it. Definitely.
I'll definitely give it a go.
Yeah, that sounds good. Right, I think we've covered Look of the King then, because we're only trying to spend about 10 to 15 minutes at most on. I think we probably went a bit long on that. Sorry, Nora, Nessa and Amy have spoken to me before. I talk a lot. I'm really sorry.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's one thing I said when I found out Damian was doing it. I was like, oh, okay, well, if we don't have anything to talk about, Damian can talk to the rest of us.
Yeah. It's a gift and it's a curse. Fangs of War now. Fangs of War, E.J. Doble. So Fangs of War. I saw Fangs of War doing the rounds on Bookstagram for a little while before I read it, and I saw Bookstagrammers that I quite trust and have similar opinions to sharing their thoughts, and that they loved it. And I thought, right, okay, this is obviously a book that I need to read. And when we started our the Fantasy Fellowship Indie Spotlight, I said to Sarah, like, I pushed for Fangs of War. So I've recently just read this book, and this book is really good. The guy's only, like, at the time he was only 19 years old, and I've spoken with him for a YouTube discussion like this, and Ethan Doble, he carries himself well beyond his years. He's 20 now, I believe, and he just how impressive he is at the way he carries himself, and as an author, because I've not only read his Fangs of War, but I've read his novella The Crescent Moon, which is absolutely fantastic, sublime, and I recommend that massively to anyone that will listen. So yeah, Fangs of War, very different to the Look of a King. It's grimdark, very Look of a King, which is very, like I said, I don't mean in a disrespectful way, it's quite simple. It's more traditional fantasy, but more historical fiction. But the Fangs of War is very, very dark. There's a lot more complexity going on with the characters and the worlds. And like I said, the fact that this has come from like a 19-year-old guy's head, it's just very impressive. So, Amy, I believe that you said the other day that you've got quite a hot take on this. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, okay. So I started reading it in December.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just because I was in a bit of a slump, but I was finding it really difficult.
Yeah.
I just found it's really wordy, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
no,
like
that does make sense.
Doble is very simple and it's very easy to follow, but not Doble, Tom's book is very easy to follow, whereas I found as Doble's it was very like flowery, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that. It was
like
very...
And there are so many similes. I feel like every sentence has a simile in it, and he's always comparing something to something else, and I'm like, okay, but it gets to a point where I feel like you need to stop comparing it to something else.
Yeah.
It just gets a bit too like.
Let it find its own identity at this point. Yeah. Don't compare it to let it find its own identity. Yeah.
But I also think because I was reading it in like small sections, just because I wasn't gelling with it.
Yeah.
I wasn't really following the story, so I would pick it back up and I'd be like, I don't know what's going on. Or I don't know if it's because it feels more character driven than plot based.
Oh, definitely, 100%, definitely.
And I don't know if it's just that I prefer more plot based than character based.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've got to about 50% in it, and that was about the start of Jan, and I haven't picked it up since. And people are telling me to DNF it, and I really don't like doing it, but I might. But there's that little part in me where I'm like, but what if?
Yeah.
What if I get to the end and I'm like, oh my god, that ending completely makes up for everything? Because it's a bit like Abercrombie with the blade itself.
Yeah.
I really didn't enjoy that for pretty much the first 75%. But that's very character driven as well.
It is.
And then I got to the end, like the last 25%, and I was like, actually, this is pretty good. It's getting somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read the second ones for that. So I don't know whether just to keep going, get myself over the line, and then decide. But yeah, I know it's been a popular opinion because it seems like everyone else did love it.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean it's a bad book. It's just a personal preference.
No, of course, definitely. That's what I mean. It's interesting you say that about. It doesn't mean it's a bad book. I'm going to slightly go off the trail from indie here and just, keeping track with Doble here using a simile. I'm going to compare it to something else. The Locked Tomb. I made it quite clear on the Fantasy Fellowship Discord, I do not like the Locked Tomb books at all. But I don't think they're bad books, and they're obviously very, very much beloved in the community and by readers alike. They just don't gel for me, and that might be the same for you, Amy. And it's interesting you say about Abercrombie as well, because when I spoke with Doble, he did say that his biggest inspiration for his work is Abercrombie, and I got that vibe as well from reading Fangs of War, that it was very similar to The Blade itself in terms of it's not very plot driven until the very end. It's very character driven, and like The Blade itself, a lot of the characters that you focus on in The Blade itself are villainous characters. Glocker, and that's the same with Fangs of War. I think there's like 5 or 6 point of view characters, and the majority of them are villainous, apart from 1 or 2. And you spend a lot of time with the villainous characters, seeing, and I like that because I like the villains. I prefer a villain to a hero in my stories. I know that's quite cliche at this point because back in the day everyone loved a hero, but it seems in the modern day everyone loves a villain, and I can see why they do. Because they just tend to be more interesting characters. Yeah, they tend to be a bit more interesting. But you said about preferring plot-based books to character-based books. I like a mix, but I tend to prefer character-based because my favourite books are Robin Hobb, Brown the Alderlings, and that's all character-driven fits. Anyone who's listening fits Farseer, greatest fantasy character of all time. You can put that on a t-shirt. I won't ever settle anyone debating me on that.
I've not read Robin Hobb yet, so now I'm a bit nervous. Because I've got like the first 3 series of it, so I'm like, uh-oh.
You better like it. You'll be kicked from the Discord. You don't.
I know, Sarah won't be happy with me.
He won't be. Tom's been banned from the Discord ever since he revealed that he didn't like Hobb. But yeah, the Fangs of War. It's very flowering. I believe I saw him say it somewhere. I believe that you heard it as well, Nessa, that he did say that for book 2, The Horns of Grief, he's learned from his mistake of being overly flowery and descriptive, and that he's gone for a more sort of direct, less wordy writing style. Yeah. So Nessa, share your thoughts.
Well, I had no idea what I was getting into when I was starting to read The Fangs of War. Absolutely no idea. Zero. I just went in and I was hooked. I kept reading and it was phenomenal. I couldn't believe that there was like all those points of views, all those characters. None of the characters were superfluous. Like every character was there for a reason. Their story was there for a reason. There was like no excess. I never wondered, okay, why that character why are we troubling with this character? What's this character doing here? It all made sense. And the way he writes villains and morally good, great characters, I have never in my life thought I simultaneously want to strangle a character and be interested in that character's story. Like, I have spoken on Twitter so many times that I want the character to go step on a Lego and die. It's unbelievable. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Brilliant.
I want him to step on a Lego like every single day, but his story is so fascinating that like you're reading him and you want to know more, and at some points you're even rooting for him because it's so well written, and you can't, and it's brilliant. And I mean, a book at the end of the book, it's not that I loved every character, it's just that every character was so well written, so good, they made so much sense. The whole book was better because all those characters were there.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really impressive cast. And if I could compare it to like an impressive cast of characters from a book, it's very George Martin-esque, I thought, in terms of A Song of Ice and Fire. It had a lot of very dubious, morally grey sort of characters that you kind of couldn't help but root for. And like you said, Ravak, you know, you want him to step on the Lego. You think, Ravak, oh, he's a total piece of shit, isn't he? But every time I finished one of his chapters and got to say Broska, I love Broska, or Kavara, I loved all of them. But as much as I enjoy reading their chapters, I thought, I want to get back to Ravak, see what Ravak's getting up to. And Ravak's going through
what kind of shit he cooked up.
And he's going through all these different villages, and he's, you know, pillaging and killing, and it's just like, this guy's a piece of shit, but I want to see him pillaging and killing more, you know. He's surrounded by several morally good characters as well, trying to do the right thing, trying to oppose him. It's just like, you know, screw these guys. I want Ravak to kill with these guys. I want to see Ravak doing what he's doing. And he's a total, you know, piece of shit, but you can't help but be glued to his pages and root for his character. You think, I believe there's one part where they're trekking through a swamp and there's a giant monster that appears and starts attacking his warband, and they're all fleeing. Ravak's just taking it on single-handedly. You think, this guy's a total arsehole, but I want him to, you know, I want to see more of this. And
like, you're simultaneously praying the monster will kill him and simultaneously praying that he'll survive.
Yeah, you want him to die, but you want him to survive. Just you know, have a real like big maiming injury to him, but hopefully he survives. So like he gets his comeuppance, but he still lives. Another thing that I remember you discussing in the buddy read as well, channel for it, Nessa, was the fight scenes was so well written and so fluid and full of such action. One of the things that you said as well is it reminded you very much of like old style sort of samurai films.
Yeah. And wuxia movies like that you see, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or Hero with Jet Li. It's like it looks like more like a well choreographed dance, that action scene. Like someone knows what they're writing about, and it's very visual. Like it's very well written, so you can kind of see all those movements and all those scenes in your head, like you're watching a movie and not reading a book, which is brilliant, just brilliant.
Yeah, they were fantastic. It was like watching a movie. It really was. The action scenes, it was just amazing. The level of detail, and it's like it was written by someone with actual experience in sort of combat. Like if you get what I'm saying, and I can't fathom. I genuinely think, I said this to him during when I interviewed him for the YouTube, and all the times that I've spoken to him on Instagram and whatnot and on Discords. I do think he's 20 years old, and this guy's he's wrote Fangs of War. Horns of Grief is coming out later this month, which I'm very excited for. I do think he is potentially the next sort of big thing in the fantasy world as an author. He is someone to watch, because if he's writing at this level at that age with that kind of prose and those sort of characters and that sort of description, then the absolute sky's his limit. And I don't know if any of you guys have read his novella, The Crescent Moon. He sent me an arc for it back in October, end of September. I read it just before the readathon. It come out end of October. It was released. It's only about 100 pages. Very different to Fangs of War. Very philosophical, different setting. It's in like an Arabian sort of setting rather than a Slavic Witcher inspired setting that the Fangs of War was. Just the level of detail and the wisdom in that book. Like I said, I can't believe the guy's 20 years old, and he's writing like this. It's so impressive. Nora, you said you haven't read the Fangs?
Yeah, I haven't, but now I really want to read it now after hearing. Yeah, and I love like a character-driven book, so I now feel like I really need to read it.
Have you read any Abercrombie?
I haven't. No. I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very Abercrombie in its style, but also kind of Witcher in terms of how bleak the world is and how derelict the world is, how you get monsters and you get a lot of very evil, nefarious sort of characters wandering around doing horrible shit. And the magic in the Fangs of War is very much in the background for the most part of the story. It's very character driven, very focused on let me just tell the book, the Fangs of War. Fangs of War basically is set after a big sort of civil war has engulfed the land, and there's these different nations, and there's sort of been on a very tentative peace for the past like 100 years or so, and then but it's all coming to a head, and you've got like an Arabian styled location, you've got a very like Italian sort of Venetian style setting, an African style setting, and they've all finally just combusted and relationships have blown up, and now they've all gone to war. And there's a lot of politicking, there's a lot of people from the same sort of camp, the same country, sort of backhand each other, trying to get one up over the other to gain power, sort of like Littlefinger and Varys and like Stannis and Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones. And the magic's very much in the background, but you see little hints of the magic throughout the background of the book, and it's slowly building up, and you hear about certain characters like the Iron Queen, and she's very interesting. It's like, oh, it's the Iron Queen, what's going on with her? She's doing some sort of dangerous magical stuff in the background, but we don't know what's going on. There's the Older Bane, which is a very ancient, all-knowing character, but you don't really know much about them, and you don't really get much insight to them to the very end of the book. And it's only towards the end of the book that the magic comes to the forefront. And speaking with Ethan, he has said that magic is going to be a massive part of the Horns of Grief, which is coming out later this month. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So yeah, definitely read it when you get the opportunity. I can't recommend it enough. It might be, out of the 4 books that we're discussing, it's potentially my favourite out of the 4. It's between that and the last book we'll be discussing. So following that, let's get on to Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. Now this is a massive one, not just in the indie fantasy world, but it's sort of blown up in, like, everyone knows about this book now. It's not just this book, this series. It's a really good series, really massive, in-depth series. And what I love about Bound and Broken and Of Blood and Fire especially is it's very traditional fantasy, and sort of in your likes of The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, that sort of style. Whereas every book in the current fantasy genre these days seems to be grim dark, following the same sort of grim dark pattern. And what I love about Of Bound and the Broken is that it goes back to classics like Wheel of Time, The Hobbit, and it emulates that sort of thing. You're chosen one coming from humble beginnings. You've got the evil sorcerer threatening the land. He's got his army of monsters supporting him. There's dragons, there's elves, there's dwarfs, there's wizards, there's gnomes, there's all that sort of thing. Giant wolves, and that's I love traditional fantasy. I prefer traditional fantasy to grim darks and your fantasy that's trying to reinvent the wheel these days. And Ryan has blown up massively, and I can see why. He definitely deserves that praise. So we'll talk about Of Blood and Fire then. So start with you, Amy, please do.
Yeah, I really enjoyed of Blood and Fire. Like you said, it's got that very classical fantasy vibe, which I
Yeah.
think might be as well why I enjoyed it more than the grim dark ones, like Doble's one we just talked about. But yeah, because obviously you've got all the elves and the dragons. But I also think the way he's written all the characters is really well done. So the bond between the three boys, it feels like an actual best friendship would, if that makes sense. Like, it feels so genuine, and I just think it's so well done. But even like some of the not the main characters, but the side characters, they're so interesting, and I really want to know more about them. Like the sister, is it Ella?
Ella, yeah.
Yeah, like I find her story so far really interesting, and I really want to know what happens to her like throughout the series.
And it obviously ends on a massive cliffhanger of Ella at the end of the book as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I read that and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And I was like, where's he gonna take this now? Like,
and you said about the bonds between the three boys being very genuine. I said that Blood and Fire gave me like huge Wheel of Time vibes. I don't know if any of you guys have read Wheel of Time.
I read the first one.
Yeah, that's the vibes. I got massive Eye of the World vibes from
Blood
and Fire. They like the three boys to reflect the three boys from their relationship is very similar. They've all three boys from each different book has been raised in like a sort of secluded area. Of Blood and Fire, they're raised in the Glade, and then Eye of the World, they're raised in Two Rivers, and it's sort of like at the edge of the world. You know, they don't really know what's going on behind their borders. They just hear rumors of stuff, but they're told not to go beyond their woods, and that's it. They know about magic, but it's sort of folk tales to them.
It's like out of sight, out of mind sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's what I loved with Eye of the World, with the what are they called? The Minotaur-looking men. I can't remember what they're called.
Oh, I know what you talk about.
Trollocs, with them invading, and then with Of Blood and Fire, with the young lads from that going out into the Glade, and they meet the Uruks, I believe they're called.
This is the thing with all these like classical fantasy ones. Yeah. I like read over the names for some of the stuff, and I'm like, I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm just gonna skip over it in my head.
Yeah, definitely. I get that. So it's interesting to see.
Callan?
Yes, yeah.
I don't know how you would pronounce it.
Yeah, that's how I pronounce it. Well, how do you guys pronounce it?
Callan?
I think in my head when I read it first, I was like Calum, but that was just like I'm really bad with names. Like I'll look at a name and it'll just like once I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I'll say it and it's like, no, that's completely different.
Yeah, definitely. And that was one of my favorite aspects of that book, though. It's just in a fantasy book, and you want to relate to the characters. You want that connection to the characters, and that's probably the most above the world and above the story is. If you don't feel nothing for the characters, if you don't have that connection with the characters, then you're not going to really care what's going on, because if something happens to those characters, well, I don't really care that's happened to that character's died, that character's mum or dad's been killed. Why do I care? I don't care about the character. And that's what I think Ryan's done really well, is through the bond that the three boys share, you sort of become assimilated to that bond as well, and you sort of feel like the fourth person in on that with them. And I love my classical traditional fantasy. I'd have a quest. I'd have a little adventure going across whilst they're trying to rid the world of evil. They've got dragons, they've got the elves, and they've got the orcish creatures, and they're trying to save their little village. And I love that sort of setting and style and vibe.
And they're always like unknowing, aren't they? So naive.
Always
like,
naive.
Oh, this can't be bad.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love as well. Is it feels like you learn about the world and what's in the world as they learn about it as well. Yeah. And that's a really, really like refreshing way of telling the story. So Nora, obviously you've read all of the cards.
Yeah, I've read the three of them. I absolutely. I also love the more like traditional fantasy, and I think I absolutely, I think this is probably one of my favorite series right now. And definitely the bond between the three boys was kind of the first thing that really drew me in. And I just love kind of being able to like explore the world with them. Like you said, like you kind of start all these things that they kind of think are just stories. And then they start to discover that like the world is so much bigger. And I just love that. And yeah, the elves and dwarves. I love the classical fantasy. And yeah, the dragons. I hadn't read a book with dragons in a long time, and it was so fun. And I'm really excited to kind of it's and as the books go on, it just it's better and better.
I'm so excited to continue. It's because I read it for the first. I read the prequel novella. I don't know if you guys have read that as well, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
I've read that before. I read Of Blood and Fire. I read them both back in September. I read the full first, and there's a lot of debate as to what one you should read first out of the two. I'm glad that I read the full first, definitely. Dragons, man, they're just quintessential fantasy, aren't they? You know, if fantasy books got dragons in it, it's automatically up another level for me. I just love dragons. They're the ultimate fantasy creature. And I remember Cahill, when he, spoilers, gets his dragon. What an epic scene that was. I loved it. I just love dragons. They're so epic. And the what was the dwarfs? They had the tunnel, the tram, didn't they, to get to
the wind tunnels? Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Like that was such a unique sort of mode of transportation I've never seen in any sort of book or fantasy film, and I loved that. And I've actually ordered Ryan's Broken Binding special edition, which looks absolutely beautiful. I can't wait for that to arrive.
I'm just so sad it's not arrived yet.
I know it's taken so long, but it's going to be worth it when it comes. And I do believe one of the illustrations in that is the wind tunnel. So I can't wait for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I held off on it for a while.
Yeah.
Like of not getting it, and then I gave it, and I was like, okay, never mind. I'm buying it.
One of the most gorgeous books that they out there. I'm a sucker for the Broken Binding. Obviously, I've got their Pillars of Peace from Tom. I got their children. I'm on their sub. I've got their children at Tom. If it's nice, I'm going to get it from them. Hurts, my bank account doesn't like it, but it's got to be done.
I think that's the problem being in the book community, isn't it? It's bad with the bank balance. Going back to the illustrations, though, I really like that in the actual books there are illustrations.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a really nice touch to be able to actually see what Ryan was imagining.
No, I 100% agree. And I know, like, sort of, I don't know, years ago, there used to be like a little joke that people could only read books with pictures in. But, like, I would love it if you got more fantasy books with pictures in. It doesn't have to be like a proper picture book, but like, I don't know if any of you guys have read Empire of the Vampire from J. Christoph. That has illustrations in it every few pages or so, and they just add so much to the story, the imagination. It helps with. I know part of the reading a book is conjuring up that image in your head and picturing how you picture it, but with the illustrations itself, sometimes I just think that's a nice extra added layer to the book. Each time.
Yeah, I think in epic fantasy, illustrations are really a key.
Yeah.
Because it's a world from the author's head, and you've never seen that world before. Illustrations really help with the reader imagine the world that it was in the author's head for so long. And I think, like, one of the things that I like about this Broken Bindings edition of Blood and War is that Brian, I think, was very closely involved with the illustrators who did all the illustrations, because I think he realizes how important those illustrations and illustrators are for fantasy, especially epic fantasy books. Like, when you think about it, all the best fantasy books have great illustrations. For example, Tad Williams. I connect always Tad Williams with Michael Whelan's illustrations. They're really the key to those books. You know, great books and great illustrations. They're like, I don't know, bread and butter.
I agree, and definitely with a lot of like Lord of the Rings editions as well. You get illustrated editions as well. You and I have my my Wheel of Time old style hardcovers as well. The illustrations on them, they're my favourite book covers by far. I love a classic sort of 80s, 90s nostalgic fantasy book cover. So I would definitely like to see more illustrations in my modern fantasy books, definitely, because it helps with picturing the characters. Because I find a lot of the time, I don't know if you guys do the same, I tend to go look up fan art of the characters so I can picture what they look like when I'm reading them. Obviously, I get my own interpretation of what they look like, but that might be way off to other people. So I tend to like go search up fan art of the characters and get spoiled in the process.
That is always the risk when like you can't help but look and you're like, oh no, I shouldn't have looked at that one. I've seen something I shouldn't have.
Definitely. So just Nessa, just your thoughts then of Blood and Fire. So share your thoughts.
My thoughts are that unfortunately this was another book I didn't get to in December because it was crazy. I have all the books, they're waiting for me. I just need to find the time. And look, our second readathon is around the corner. What better time to read all those books and then
they're very chunky books for the readathon though.
They are chunky books.
He's the new one.
I love a chunky book in this book.
It's like 1,000 pages, the new one, isn't it?
The new one is it's so good though. Oh, I loved it. And there's like more point of views. It's amazing. It was really good.
And I messaged Ryan as well about something. And I think I messaged him about like, wow, that is really chunky. And he was like, yeah, I know. And he was like, the printers have a limit. And I was like, I bet you found that out because you reached that limit. And he was like, maybe.
It's sort of giving me like PTSD now, hearing that it's a 1,500 page book, because our last readathon I went for the page count. So nearly every book I read was over 1,000 page long. I put the entire release Stormlight archive in that readathon, and they're all like 1,200, 1,300 page books. So, and it slumped me for like 2 to 3 months. I didn't read for like 2 to 3 months after. And now I'm just thinking, oh God, do I want to go near a 1,500 page book? But
I'm just thinking, what's it going to feel like in your hands when we get the hardcover? That's going to be heavy.
It's going to be 2 books. The last book, it's going to be into 2.
I don't know. Like I think it's 1. I think he has it
when they print it.
The pre-order from the Broken Binding, it's just 1 book.
Yeah, but when they do the Broken Binding Press special edition, I think they're gonna like in 2 parts.
Yeah, they could do that for the special, but I know like the regular, the Broken Binding one is just 1 book.
Yeah, because the plan is to
like
do
ants letters.
The plan is to do the entire series, isn't there? As a special edition, so that is going to be one chunky hardcover, isn't there? Wow, kill someone with that.
That series.
Yeah, Nessa, get to it, because I know you like your traditional fantasy. I know you like your Tad Williams, Dragonbone Chair, don't you?
Yeah.
So you would definitely read Brian's Bound and Broken series. They're excellent traditional fantasy style books. So we're on to our final book here, which is the Souls Aspect. Yeah, I love this one. It was another short one, like Tom's Look of a King, less than 300 pages. Reads at absolute rapid pace. And what I really love about the Souls Aspect, it combines so many different elements of beloved fantasy books out there, and it really felt like Mark was writing a true love letter to all of the fantasy hard hitters. So, like, to me, Souls Aspect, written by Mark Holloway, it's a very coming of age fantasy. It's got your magical school, your academy. It's got your young boy from a secluded town, doesn't know much. He just knows about the outside world and knows that there's magic. But it combined a lot of elements for me of Name of the Wind. If any of you guys have read that from Patrick Rothfuss, I got massive Name of the Wind vibes in terms of going to the Magical Academy, and for Cahill finding that bond with the other guys, his other friends at the academy, people he usually wouldn't fit in with, very much like an oddball, mismatched group of friends. They've come together due to like forced proximity with each other at this magical academy. Also gave me Harry Potter sort of vibes, very Hogwarts-like, the school, albeit a tad bit darker. And sort of like Wheel of Time and of Blood and Fire vibes with the friendship and the camaraderie between the friendship group. And the magic system to me was really, really, really good. Very, very unique. It felt like sorry, Seal's gonna hate that me saying very unique because it doesn't make sense. Sorry, Seal. It was unique. It's almost like a magic system that wouldn't feel out of place in like Brandon Sanderson's like Cosmere books, because the Cosmere books, Brandon Sanderson's the king of magic systems, isn't he? Very intricate magic systems, and that's what I liked with the Souls aspect. The magic of the aspects, really cool, very distinguished. It was unique, and it wouldn't have felt out of place coming out in a Stormlight book or a Mistborn book. So yeah, as I said earlier, probably that or Fangs of War. I'm sort of edging towards the Souls aspects as my favourite book out of these four. It was excellent. I thought, just very quick, short page count, but every word mattered, every interaction mattered. The character journey from Cahill, from the young physician trainer in his hometown to becoming this ultra powerful magic wizard, and meeting the friends that he did along the way. I just absolutely loved it. Top marks for me. Brilliant, excellent coming of age fantasy, heartwarming, tragic, beautiful. Couldn't
emotional devastation.
So a lot of devastation. And Nessa, I know you're a massive fan of this book as well, and especially the very different change in tone of as the book progresses as well. It's a very, very jarring, but not in the bad way jarring, but the tone changes massively. So Nessa, share your thoughts, please.
This book was actually really surprising to me, because the best way I would describe it is subtle. There's a lot of heavy themes that are in this book. Some of them are like parenting, about betrayal. There's, although I hesitate to use that term, there's a lot of nationalism as a theme in the book, between like thoughts about different groups of people.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's very subtle. There's a lot of xenophobia there.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. Very subtle.
And as a reader, you are aware, but it's very subtly done. So every theme is kind of subtly woven into this book. You are aware, but it's kind of in the background because you're focused more on the plot and the characters you actually really like and enjoy reading. And then there's moments in the book that are very, very meticulously and precisely sort of picked, where the author like hits you and like it stabs a dagger inside of you and twists for good measure for maximum emotional devastation. And all of what he subtly sort of wove into the story kind of hits you at once, and you're like, oh my god, what just happened? I don't know what's going on, but this is beautiful, this is painful, this is emotional devastation. I love it. Everyone needs to read this.
It is fantastic. And you said about the themes of parenting as well. One of my favorite scenes from that book, very early on in the book, I think it might have been the end of chapter 1 or chapter 2. Cahill was with his dad, and Cahill suffers from seizures, and he believes there's something wrong with him. I remember the chapter ended with his dad saying to him, "Son, there's nothing wrong with you." And it thought, you know, just the way he said it was so tenderly written as well. It's just like, that's to hit me straight in the heart, that has. And I was hooked from that moment on. And it's interesting you say about the xenophobia as well, because it is very subtle. It's very much in the background, but it's such a nice added layer to the story. Because I spoke with Mark as well about the book, and he said how he wished it to come across was he wanted it to seem like your classic YA sort of middle grade Harry Potter, Hunger Games sort of start to the book that everyone loves, and then as the book progresses, it changes to a much darker tone, and it flips on its head, and you get the emotional devastation. I remember when I read a certain part of the book I was reading, I was like, oh, son of a bitch, threw my book down. It's like, that didn't just happen. And it just completely opened up the book from what I thought was a nice, heartfelt, warm, you're all off at Hogwarts, learning to do magic, and, oh God, there's that Draco Malfoy-like character over there. I hope he gets what's coming to him. But, nothing really bad. But then the big thing happens. Like, whoa, what has just happened? What is this book? Where is this series going now? And, yeah, masterful change of tone. What about you, Nora? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I definitely I always love the kind of friendship in books, the relationship between kind of as he meets new people and the friendships he forms. And then definitely the ending and just kind of that change of tone and just how it suddenly got like very dark. I really enjoyed it. It's like the kind of slower pace at the beginning. You're kind of just, you get to know the characters and kind of how they interact together. And then I really love the magic system, kind of this all with kind of that sciencey energy. And I really found that very, it's, and kind of, like you said, Brandon Sanderson, kind of that, I enjoyed that. And just the ending, was really, I was like, there was definitely that one scene, which, as it kind of just all of a sudden totally flipped. And you kind of also kind of this, whereas at first you're like, okay, this is good, this is bad. And now you're kind of like, okay, it's kind of like, what is good, what is bad, and what, the aspect itself, like, what is it exactly? And I'm excited to see like learning more about that.
That's cool thing you mentioned about the magic, the science aspect of the magic. I find in a lot of fantasy books, magic is just this sort of mysterious thing that lives in the world. No one questions it. It's just people have it or people know about it. But with the souls aspect, there's a very science-like aspect to the aspect, no pun intended. And there was just a really cool perspective on magic, I thought, because it never really dives into like a science side of magic. It's always, it's mysterious magic, we know about it, it just exists, that's magic in our world. But here's in the souls aspect, it's very scientific, and there's a lot of mystery to it as well, and it almost feels like the aspect, like a character itself, a being itself, rather than just being like a force, in ways that Cahill communicates with the aspect, the magic of the souls aspect. It does feel like a character in itself, which is a very unique take on it as well. But just I can't gush about it enough, that book, especially the change in tone, because as you, Nora, and Nessa and myself have already said, is everything's all nice and charming and peaceful at the start, and as the book progresses, they're running around the lake doing laps of the lake, trying to get their fitness up in class, and it's just like, this is cute, nice slice of life stuff. And then
just
absolute change in tone massively, almost feels like a different book, but like it works. And especially that ending chapter, the epilogue, how it's worded and how haunting it feels as well. And I instantly ordered the Souls Instrument in hardback as well, straight away after that. And it could be my favorite indie book that I've read so far. What about you, Amy? What do you think? Oh, sorry, Nora.
Sorry. No, I was going to say, I almost felt kind of the character Cahill, like by the end of the book, he felt like this almost different character to me, like just completely, just from what he'd gone through. There was just such a change in kind of, he goes through a lot in kind of near the end, but that he just feels so different,
very different
near the end.
he's not this charming sort of naive farm boy, so to speak. He's almost ominous and sort of harrowing and godlike, isn't he? By the end of it, it's just like wow, and it's a character trajectory and change that doesn't feel like it's come out of nowhere. Obviously, the change in tone comes out of nowhere, but the character change makes sense. It doesn't feel like, oh, that's unrealistic. It makes total perfect sense within the confines of the story, and I absolutely love that. Everything just flowed so well, flowed extremely. Your thoughts, Amy?
I haven't actually read this one.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure I've got it on my Kindle, so I'm definitely going to get around to doing it soon, because I like that you've compared it to like Sanderson.
Yeah.
And all that
you
stuff.
should.
I've not read it yet.
It's that's how I would describe it. It's a love letter to big hard hitting fantasies, like your Harry Potter, your Sanderson, your Name of the Wind. And I spoke with Mark before, and he did say like he has had trouble conveying that with people because he wanted it to seem like a typical YA. Everyone's having a good time, everything's peaceful. You've got your antagonistic characters, but they're not evil. They're just a bit dickish. They're kids. But he said that was very intentional. That change in tone, and very much loved that book. Very much.
The thing is, in when I think about the souls aspect, and if I want to sort of put it into a category or in a box, coming of age is the closest category I can put it in, because it doesn't really feel YA like a it's not typical. Nothing in that book is typical, and that's why I keep saying that it's really, really subtle. It has all those elements like a magic school, but it's closer to Ursula K. Le Guin than to a Hogwarts style of school. But everything is kind of very subtle, and as you keep reading it, you kind of getting hints that it's not gonna be your typical YA or coming of age, that it's gonna be something different. And you just have to get to them. When you get to that point, you really, it's maximum emotional devastation, as I keep saying, but then everything makes kind of sense. And all those kind of hints and the subtlety makes sense. It was leading to that point. So that's why this wasn't really a typical sort of coming of age novel. Yeah, it's the closest sort of category I can fit it in, but it's not that, close enough.
Definitely, it's definitely feels like coming of age, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you can go on to Mark's website. Because one of my favourite elements of that book as well was the setting. I loved the original setting. It felt very gothic at the start, and then as they moved to the different country and the academy, everything brightened up. And then you could go onto his website, you see some wonderful fan art that Mark's commissions. But, absolutely sublime. The vibes from that book are insane. But the more we talk about it, I would say at the four here, and that's not a knock on the other three books, because I've loved all four of them. Really have loved all four of them. Are excellent. But for me, the souls aspect is my personal favourite at the four. So I'm going to ask you guys here. I know obviously you guys haven't read all of them. Some of you guys haven't read like one or two. Start with you, Amy. At the ones that you've read, which would you say is your favourite?
Definitely of Blood and Fire. Yeah, definitely that one.
Blood and Fire. Nora?
Also of Blood and Fire. Yeah, I absolutely love it. Yeah, the entire series. It's just
classic traditional fantasy.
Yeah, I love it.
You can't go wrong. Nessa?
Well, it's between Soul's Aspect and Fangs of War. They're very different books, and I like both of them for very different reasons. But I couldn't, like, if you forced me, like really, really forced me to pick, I'd probably pick Fangs of War, because it's kind of, I enjoyed it more because I've never read a book where I was interested in every character. Like, there's always in a book characters you like more and characters you're like, let's get this over with. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's get to the interest. Fangs of War, every character was interesting. I didn't want to like skip a page or read faster so I can get to the more interesting character. I just wanted to enjoy each chapter, each character because they were so fantastic.
Yeah, admittedly, with me for Fangs of War, when Revek wasn't on page, I was like, it's like that Top Gear meme with Jeremy Clarkson. He's like, "This is good, but this is brilliant," and like that was me. Like Guevara, Marcus, Broska, this is good. Revak, this is brilliant. You know, and I loved all the characters, but I did have that urge to come on, let's get to Revak again now. Bring me back to this dick. That's all I could think about. If you had to have me at gunpoint and I had to choose, sorry Ethan, sorry Ryan, sorry Tom, I have to go for Souls aspect just because I'm a sucker for that sort of Hogwarts, magical academy, Name of the Wind style sort of thing. What I grew up with. I'm a big Harry Potter fan. Name of the Woods, Pine, Oak, Beach, Cherry. Name of the Wind in my top 3 favorite books of all time. So yeah, I would go with Souls aspect. If you had a gun to my head, yeah. And I'm very much excited because apart from Pillars of Peace, Look of the King, I haven't read the second book of all the rest of these series. So I'm very much looking forward to getting to all of them. Yeah. Right. I think that's covered everything, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Tom's gonna be so upset none of us picked his book.
Oh no, I'm gonna have to message him. I'm gonna have to message him and just say, Tom, before you watch this.
It's the book, but
you've got the most beautiful edition though, Tom. The brooch you do have that.
But we've not seen Ryan's yet.
Not seen Ryan's yet. Screw Doble and Holloway. They don't even have special editions, Tom.
Exactly. Tom's the only one who actually has a physical special at the moment, so there you go.
You're winning there, Tom. Right, right. That's a wrap up on this indie spotlight discussion. Thank you all for joining us and thank you for watching. I've been joined by Nessa, Amy, and Nora, who have all been absolutely fantastic tonight. I've loved hearing their insights, loved hearing their thoughts. It's been a lovely chat. I hope all of you that are watching this video get the same sort of enjoyment from it that I have done. Obviously, if you liked this video, be sure to hit the subscribe button at the bottom. We've got lots of exciting content coming out, a lot more exciting content that we've already released. And if you did like this as well, be free to join our Discord community, which you can find in the description below. Or you can also find us on Instagram at fantasy_fellowship or on Twitter with the twits at fan fellowship. Be sure to give all of those socials a like and a follow and subscribe to this video, and hopefully we'll see more from you guys soon.
And like the video.
And like the video. And comment on the video as well. Comment, share, subscribe, do all of that, guys. Join the Discord, follow the Instagram, follow the Twitter, do all of it because it's a great community. Really, really great community. Lots of different opportunities and lots of exciting things going on. Thank you guys for joining me.